Welcome to the IR Digital Podcast. IR Global is the largest international professional services network. I'm your host of the IR Digital Podcast, Jennifer Riggins. Today, we are sitting down with Dr. Robert Lewandowski, founding partner of the Polish law firm of the same name. And we're talking about the risks of our hoarding of data and how to combat cyber attacks to minimize those risks, and specifically how advisors are helping to combat what is really just, if you watch the news, seems to be a daily occurrence of these cyber attacks across different jurisdictions. So Robert, please welcome to the show.
Yeah, so good morning, Jennifer. So thank you for having me at this podcast. I really appreciate. I can say something about myself. I'm a lawyer working in Warsaw. I have been advising domestic and international clients on business law, especially M&A transactions, corporate law, commercial litigation, but also on data protection law. I am currently working for companies as a data protection officer and advise them how personal data should be processed in a transparent, lawful way. This is my job here as well.
Is this a job that came up because of GDPR, the European data law, or you've been doing it before?
This job came up because, of this general data protection regulation, which was enforced in Poland and in other member states of the European Union in May 2018. And this was a need, and we have been approached by many clients to advise them on data protection law. And I have decided to be engaged as a data protection officer, and I am still working for them and advise them on, I think, difficult issues related to this data protection law.
Is this different for you because before you were being an external advisor, but now you're actually joining parts of teams because the data protection officer is a role that needs to be part of a team? So how has your life and job work changed?
Yeah, sometimes, I have to make visits to companies, but, I work also externally and advise them, from outside. But, sometimes there's a need to come to look inside to check, documents. But this is a little bit different to my previous work. But, I have adopted very fast to this new requirement here.
So why do you think there are more cyber attacks recently?
Yes, I think the cybersecurity, Jennifer, is a very hot topic in these days. So we have seen many major ransomware attacks in the couple of years, but also in the couple of days. And we have heard about ransomware attacks on the Colonial Pipeline in the United States, on the state health services provider in Ireland. And I think 2 days ago, it was a very major attack on JBS meat processor in the United States, causing disruption to business and downtimes. So I think this ransomware is currently the most common and prolific forms of cyber attacks. And I think the threat is still imminent, and the companies should be prepared when the worst comes to the worst.
Is it that there are more cyber attacks, or we're just more aware of it? Or are there potentially a lot more ransomware and other attacks that are happening that organizations aren't aware of?
Yes, I would say this, as I said, the companies should be cautious. And I think on the other hand, the companies should, develop a maybe different, proactive approach to the cyber security. And this is very required in these days to put in place many new technologies, techniques, tools, to prevent this kinds of attacks in the future. But on the other hand, we can speak about later, it is important for the companies to have the cyber insurance to minimize the cost if such incident occurs. And this is very important to have both sides, and to check the security, and also to protect the companies in the case of a cybersecurity breach. Yeah.
So ransomware is a hot word we're hearing lately. It sounds like blackmail, but I don't really know what it is. So let's start by identifying what ransomware is, and then what happens to your clients if they've suffered a ransom attack. How does that work?
Yes, I think in simple terms, Jennifer, ransom is a malicious virus that threatens to destroy files or reputation of a victim. And we know that there are many ways how hackers can get hold of the victim's files. And the most common, as you know, is so-called phishing. which is an attempt to trick the victim into handing over sensitive information to the hackers, as bank details, passwords, other credentials. So the hackers pose themselves as a reputable company, for instance, as a bank or service provider, and they try to dupe a victim into opening messages, emails, sending out to employees of a company. And sometimes, the victims can be taken to a fake website, which can look just a real thing, and then this fake website can install a malware which can then steal personal data. So after the hackers get access to the network, then they start penetrating the network, stealing data, and then encrypting them, using them later, as a leverage against the victim. And the final stage is to address the victim and to send out a ransom demand through a sort of ransom notice, asking the victim to pay the ransom within a certain period of time. If not, the data may be put online, may be published, damaging the reputation of the company and its customers. But there's also common that the hackers sent also a notice to the victim, including also a list of this encrypted data which has been stolen, and there is also this threat imminent associated with this attack that should the victim not pay before the deadline is up, then the data will be automatically published. So there's also an additional threat to this ransomware notification.
Is it legal to pay a ransom? Isn't that contributing to crime?
Yes, I would say this is, we can regard, assess, the ransom, from different perspectives. So from a perspective of criminal law, and also from a perspective of civil law, but also, with regard to requirements, notification requirements, the client hit by the hackers has to meet in terms to comply with legal provisions. But it's very important. It's like a complex matter. And maybe, if you allow me, I would start with criminal law. So it's like a very important aspect, because under Polish law, and I think there's maybe a similar situation in the UK, action of hackers, including phishing, stealing data, encrypting data, and finally deploying a ransom demand, are felonies. So very severe crimes, such as computer fraud, money extortion, and punished here by jail sentence up to 5 years or more. It's like a severe crimes committed by the hackers. So, but the payment of ransom is itself not prohibited by criminal law in general. So there's no legal provision prohibiting the company. But now this under discussion, maybe you have heard about this, there are some, considerations to release a sort of prohibition on ban, like a ban on payment of ransom. But of course, there is, maybe you can discuss it later, but at the moment, the payment of ransom is not prohibited by law. So a company paying the ransom to the hackers make itself not liable in terms of criminal law in general. But as you know, the payment of ransom is addressed to hackers, and they sometimes operate from different jurisdictions. And then the company may also, it is also maybe a consideration, may also be accomplice to this payment if the company knows that the money sent to the hackers will be used for other criminal activities, for instance, financing terrorism. And then in such a cases, the company should be cautious and maybe obtain an approval from authorities to make this payment, because it may be also liable, sort of accomplice to this further criminal activities if the company is aware of the situation. But also, the payment of ransom may also trigger, different sanctions in other jurisdictions, so which may be imposed on the victim as well. So I think it is a job of a lawyer to assess the situation and then to advise the clients on this risk, which may be also involved in the payment of ransom. So before it is made, so the lawyer has to check, if it is like a possible and also lawful. But this was, perspective of criminal law, because now we are talking about civil law. So we can also, consider the ransom demand being an arrangement between the hackers and the victim. And this ransom demand is, in legal terms, an ultimatum, not negotiable in most cases, because the hackers don't have to be paid very fast without any considerations. And if this deadline is not met, then it is a risk, high risk, that the data will be put online. But important is that this arrangement between the hackers and the victim, in the eyes of law, is void, is illegal. And because it is illegal, it is not enforceable, Jennifer. So if the victim decides to pay the ransom, the question arises if the victim is then, after the payment is provided, able to recover the money paid to the hackers. And so I think there's general view on this, also on the common law, that this contract this is not possible. But we should also consider that in this situation, the victim is induced by fraud or duress to enter into illegal agreement. Sometimes the victim doesn't have any choice, but he has to pay the ransom, and is under pressure to make this as soon as possible to save its business and to avoid any kind of further consequences. And then I think in such a case, this is the different situation. The courts would allow the victim restitution of what the victim has given by way of performance. So in fact, I think there was recently a court case in the United States when the court decided in favor of the victim and ruled in favor against the hackers. But the other question is, how the victim can identify the hackers, because we know that the hackers operate from different jurisdictions. They remain in shadows, and it is very difficult to trace them down. And I think this is also maybe a job of the lawyers and also governments to help the victim to recover the money paid in ransom. Because I think there is this notification requirements may result from different laws, and I think for domestic law, but also from contracts the client, the victim, made with the customers. Because for instance, if a company is a public company listed on the stock exchange market, there are many obligations towards the shareholders or interested parties to report about this incident as soon as possible. So also such obligations may result from GDPR law, because some personal data may be also involved, and also if the company has a cyber insurance, it is sometimes the request of an insurance company to report this incidents to authorities.
What does it involve, the notification? Because first of all, it's really interesting right now because in the UK, we're being bombarded with fake SMS. I mean, bombarded from fake SMS of the banks and the Royal Mail right now for phishing and ransomware. And it's like the first pop-up before even GDPR when you log into your bank account and things is that we have this. So obviously there's the risk when you get a ransomware attack, it lowers the public trust in you, but maybe that's unavoidable anyway. But you have to notify them that their information is out there. But what type of advice do you then provide the customers?
Yes, I know it is very, very sensitive issue, Jennifer, you raised. But I would say at the beginning, when there is no possibility that the company has been affected by this ransomware attack, that the client should immediately contact a sort of forensic experts, like a cybersecurity professionals. They have to check very fast what the situation is, finding out the problem, and to confirm that the client is dealing with a real ransomware attack and not with a fake. And then to help how to fix the issue, because it's like in this early stage to make this possible and to establish that it is like a genuine attack. And this is I think the job of professionals, so cybersecurity professionals, experts, who should work very closely with the client at the beginning of this incident. Just my advice.
How often are they fake?
Yeah, it happens sometimes because the hackers are criminals, and they are trying to get money. And sometimes the clients sometimes is not aware and he pays, and the hackers take the money and run away. And to avoid the situation, I think that the client has to establish at first, if this is a genuine attack, ransomware attack, and after that, the client may try to renegotiate the terms of a ransom demand with the hackers, but it's very difficult in my view. But sometimes it is possible also with the help of law enforcement agencies, because police sometimes is aware of ongoing attacks and knows the hackers, and then it may be easy to I think some companies are specializing in this field of advice that can help to get in touch with hackers and try to renegotiate the terms of a ransom.
Is there often friction then if you're involving local law enforcement and then with the legal advisory and the corporation, and then you also have these different jurisdictions, different borders? How does that friction and how does that work when you've got potentially, I think the ones making the headlines right now are the Russian hackers, but of course there are hackers everywhere. How do you deal with that? Like if you're a European entity and you're dealing with Russian, or you're an EU entity and you're dealing with a multinational corporation and maybe local police, how does that work?
Yes, I think it's the situation. I think here's a potential work for higher global lawyers because the platform is maybe used for this, because we know that the most ransomware attacks are cross-border. So if a company is hit by a ransomware attack, there's also many branches, subsidiaries located in various jurisdictions. Many jurisdictions may be also affected by this attack. And then I think lawyers from these different jurisdictions should pool forces and to work together and to advise their clients how this ransomware attack may be responded globally and comprehensively. And this is important to also to include maybe governments, because now in this situation with JBS company, it was also, you remember, there was also, plans of this company hit by these attacks in Australia and Canada. So it's like, cross-border consequences of having, after this cybersecurity attack. And it's important to involve many lawyers working very close with the client to advise them, how to deal with this attack and how to respond it in a proper way. I think this is, my advice, and I think this is, also the job of lawyers within our global network.
Oh yeah, I can definitely see the use case of an international network of lawyers, attorneys that then you can
different regulations in different jurisdictions. So it is very important to have, this advice very quickly, because there's no time. I think the client is very pressed for time when within attack. It has to decide sometimes within many hours how to respond, and then advice must be provided very fast to help the client and to maintain the client's also reputation and its customers. Yeah.
Absolutely. It totally makes sense. You mentioned at the beginning, I believe, cybersecurity insurance. Is that a thing? How does that even work?
Yes, I think it's, cyber insurance policy is very important for companies, dealing with, electronic data, such as, personal data, financial data,
So all companies, pretty much all companies have financial data of their clients.
Having a component online, it's just like, they are exposed to risk, and then, I think it is important to have this insurance policy. But as I told you at the beginning, so it is like, having this cyber insurance policy doesn't prevent ransomware attacks. So it is very important to know, because this policy, the aim of this policy is to cover some costs associated with ransomware attacks, but this policy cannot avoid ransomware attacks. So the client should put in place right now and as soon as possible modern techniques and tools to avoid this cyber attacks in the future, and also to advise the employees how to respond to unsolicited emails, messages, phone calls. It is just like a global advice, from different point of views. But it's important for the client to understand the nature of cyber insurance policy. But having a cyber insurance policy can help the client to minimize business disruption during a cyber incident and its aftermath. So this is now like a purpose of this cyber insurance policy.
So to understand how it works, because I think of like health or car insurance policies, things like that. The idea is that you would, if you have to pay ransom, then you would be covered up to a certain amount by.
Yeah, exactly. So this is also, the issue, very important, when negotiating the coverage plan with the insurance company. And it depends, I think every case will be treated individually, because we know that the cost of cyber insurance policy will depend on a number of different factors, including the business, the size of business of the client, the annual revenue. There are many other factors, such as in which field of business the client is operating in, the type of data the business typically deals with, as well as the overall security of the network. Because as you know, clients which have poor cybersecurity or has previously history of falling victim to hackers, it is likely that will get charged more than companies which has a good reputation for keeping itself secure. So it's like a big difference. But I would say that in general, the cyber insurance covers the immediate costs associated with falling a victim to a cyber attack, including data recovery, cost of legal defense, and paying compensation to customers. And also, cost of engaging with sort of cybersecurity experts at the beginning, of this incident, when they have to check out what the situation is and to fix the issue from technical point of view. But also, it is also important to know that some cyber insurance companies cover the cost of actually giving in and paying ransom as well. But this must be negotiated, with the insurance company. It really depends, also, on size of the company. It's a profit company generates every year, but it's this is also an important issue. But we also heard recently that this Colonial Pipeline paid $4.4 million to the hackers. It's a huge amount of money. Now the question is if this money paid to the hackers will be covered by its insurance policy.
If it even has one, though, I think 4.4 million for an oil company, maybe not that much money. It's all relative, isn't it? Maybe they asked a reasonable amount that they're like, yeah, take it, bye, because the blocking of the supply chain would be worse. Speaking of supply chain, there was this is being recorded June 4th, maybe about a week ago in the US, there was a ransomware attack through Constant Contact, which is a third party, so an email SaaS that was used to then disrupt about 150 NGOs and charities. This happened in the US, and I'm wondering how that works. I think that's a logical attack vector to go after a SaaS that people are using, like a large popular SaaS, to then get to the people, because that's becoming more sophisticated. Of course, no matter how many steps you take, hackers are always going to be 2 steps ahead of you. How does it work when it becomes more complex, that you're the intermediary? If you're a SaaS, if you're a business software, and if those are becoming more popular attacks, how does it work then with insurance, and how are people protected?
Yeah, we should also be aware that not every cost will be covered by insurance policy. It's like limitations, and every client should be aware of this. And I think sometimes it happens that the company is forced to go out of business completely after the attack, and it is very unlikely that this cost, this whole disruption will be covered by the insurance policy. But also it happens when the hackers finally decide to put the sensitive data, the stolen data online, and then the customers will also be damaged by this publication. So there may be huge costs of paying to the customers. Also because of losing, if the company is losing intellectual property because of this ransom attack, there's also huge financial damage. This is also unlikely that this kind of damage will be also covered by the insurance company. It also also applies to reputational costs. because after attacks, the reputation of the company might be severely damaged, and these costs are also not covered by insurance policy, because it is very, very expensive. So it is my view on this.
Yeah, it sounds like there are very few people in the world that could actually keep up to date with everything that's happening. And it's either the hackers themselves or it's the advisors fighting again. So it totally makes sense to outsource and get external advice, because this is all you do, which is mind-boggling and stressful at times, I'm sure. But it's totally interesting and very complicated. So I love hearing about all the different partnerships
Yeah.
across that have to happen, because it has to be an international effort, just like hacking can be.
Yeah. Yes. I right. Yeah. There's also now under discussion of the issue about to prevent this attacks through uh, ban so ransom prohibition. It is like very, very now discussed, because but I think it is this idea is good as soon as the governments will establish a sort of victim support mechanism, because if a company decides finally we will prohibit it from paying ransom, then it may be very heavy costs associated with this attack, and the company finally may apply for bankruptcy or for liquidation, and then this cost will be very, very, very high. And then I think it is also possible to make this through a law introduced in many jurisdictions, but it's another question how we can help the companies being victim of this crime. So it's very, very difficult issue. Maybe.
And all the way down to the individual citizen who can have their identity stolen, their credit card stolen, and their world destroyed as well.
Yeah, but this is quite interesting point, about this payment prohibition of ransom, but to prevent this kind. But it is as soon as the governments also make this effective victim support mechanism, I think it is also considerable. Yeah.
It's definitely interesting. It's just everything has its knockdown effects, so we have to think about it from all angles and across all borders, because this is a borderless crime.
Yeah, because Jennifer, because law, it is like a general view of law enforcement agencies not to encourage hackers and to pay, because first of all, this payment is made to criminals, and we don't know how this money is used. Maybe also used for financing other crimes. There's no certainty that the hackers not hit once again this company, and this is also yeah, it is like it is like general recommendation not to pay. But of course, I think it is the final decision of the company, its final discretion about to pay or not to pay, because it's like a company's business, and it is very, very sometimes like a poker game with the hackers, and finally it's yeah, it may help the company if it is like if the hackers stick to the promise and decrypt the data and get the data back to the company. But sometimes as I told you, they take the money and run away. There's no chance to chase them down. Yeah,
Absolutely. And they're criminals, so you can't trust that they're not going to still publish the identities.
yeah, it's just important to know that it is very difficult to identify them. I think there's some kind of I don't know, but I think law enforcement agencies have this possibility maybe to locate the place they're operating from. It's like in the recent case, there's like a gang from Russia might be involved in this hitting this JBS meat processor, but so there's no further information about the identities of this group and the people are behind this attack. But I think it is very difficult to find out who the hackers are.
Mm-hmm. And especially if they're paid with cryptocurrencies that are
exactly. So and I know that companies also include this cryptocurrency in their security plans to have this money at hand. If it's incident occurs. Yeah, it's like not to hesitate. Yeah, Jennifer.
Yeah, absolutely, Robert. We could talk on this all day long, because there are so many topics and so many examples just from reading the newspaper.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you're going to have work for the long.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, for having me at this podcast. I appreciate it. I think this, very important issue, in the next couple of years, because as I told you, this is imminent threat, and the companies should be prepared, and when the worst comes to the worst, and to do everything to prevent this kind of attacks.
I think there's definitely a lot of education that has to happen, and why you need
Yeah.
partnerships like this to help prevent. Even on the individual level, we need to be more literate to not click on those links. This is a constant debate in WhatsApp groups locally in London with me and parents. And no, don't click on a link. Never click on a link that's from a
Yeah,
suspicious
exactly. So
mass.
advice
Subdomains, no, but people don't have that literacy. And then all the way up to getting the cybersecurity insurance,
Yeah.
what to do if a ransom attack happens, and how to prevent them in the future. So I think you have plenty of work to go for, Robert.
Yes, I hope. Yes. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you
for
so
having me.
much. And thank you to our listeners. These IR Digital podcasts are meant to be educational resources from experienced lawyers, accountants, and financial advisors with extensive knowledge on topics you as professionals need to know more about. And clearly this was the case today. To learn more about IR Digital and its services, please visit irglobal.com. And if you found this episode useful, because you probably should have, please consider sharing it. If listeners want to touch base with you, Robert, what's the best way for them to contact you to learn more about your law practice and, about cybersecurity help? Robert?
Maybe the contact basis, through landline, and email address, it's all available on the IR Global network. So this, I will be welcome to answer any questions related to cybersecurity law.
I'm sure you'll be bombarded with them. Thank you so much,
course,
Robert.
yes. I'm looking forward to. Thank you, Jennifer. Yeah, have a nice day, and all the best. Yeah.